You are listening to Frankly Speaking Panthers on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of College Football Tuesday. I'm your host, Larry Frank, and as always, with my co-host, Zach Mckinnell. And Zach, I want to get to the story right away before we even get to the recaps of some amazing games this past weekend and some amazing games that are also coming up this following weekend. But one of the big stories, and I'm a little bit torn, and we'll talk about, is earlier today, or maybe even late last night, it was reported that Utah quarterback Charlie Brewer has entered the transfer portal. And a lot of people, if you remember out there, Charlie was an unbelievable quarterback when he played for Matt Rule at Baylor University, broke many records, threw for 9,700 yards. I mean, was just incredible quarterback. And then when Matt left to go to Carolina, he had the opportunity to transfer, and he did. And, I believe every player has a right to do what they want to do. It's their own life. But now here is a guy who the first 3 games has not performed well for Utah. And it just so happened that Cam Rising came in and had an outstanding game in relief of Brewer, and it looks like he's going to be the starter. First of all, what went wrong here? Before we get to my point of what I don't like, let me ask you this. What was the difference and what went wrong with Brewer at Utah?
It's a different scheme, and 2, it's a whole new location, and 3, let's just be honest, the wide receiving talent at Utah isn't the same that he had 2 years ago at Baylor. And if you remember, his time at Baylor was really defined by one great year and then a bunch of mediocre games after that. And for me, it's really not a surprise that he's transferring again. Cam Rising has been a very talented prospect, and I had I'm blanking on his name, but I had a Utah insider on my show this offseason to cover Utah and just kind of go over the previous season. He thought Cam Rising was the better quarterback even this offseason, and they gave Brewer the first snaps. The same things have plagued him throughout his whole career. He's inaccurate, and he has some turnover issues, and Utah thought they had a better guy in Rising. And in this day of age of the transfer portal being wide open, if you lose your starting job in the middle of the season, you can transfer and go try to find playing time elsewhere. And I feel like Charlie Brewer feels like he's a starting quarterback, and he understood that Cam Rising's younger than him and has played better, and he didn't foresee himself getting any playing time moving forward for the Utes.
Yeah, and I don't like this, and I'll tell you why I don't like this. Because pretty much we're not sending the message out to this younger generation who's in college. They think, okay, if I fail, I'll just go somewhere else and try to make it there, rather than handling the adversity, learning to handle the adversity and working harder to become the starter. You just say, screw it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It sounds like to me, and I don't want to dwell all night on this, but it sounds like to me that Brewer is a victim of circumstance. He's a victim of not being in the same system as he was at Baylor, and the system that he's in at Utah just isn't working for him like it did at Baylor, as well as it does help, as we all know, if you have some weapons around you as well.
Yeah, and Utah's a really good team, and when you so this is kind of a lesson to players in multiple ways. And one, I fully support the transfer portal. I mean, it doesn't bother me that he wants to go elsewhere. But the thing is, one, when you transfer the first time, you need to make sure you have all the information. You need to look at the schemes, look at the coaches, look at your weapons. You need to make better informed decisions on where you transfer the first time. And two, you have to understand, just because you come from a big school or were successful at your last school, that doesn't buy you any equity at your new school. You still have to go out there and perform every week. And for me, it felt like Brewer still thinks he should have been the starting quarterback. And according to all reports, he has not been the best quarterback in practice, on the field, anything like that. So it's two big lessons for college recruits and college football players is, one, you have to do your research when you transfer. Make sure you check all the boxes and be selfish when you transfer. And what I mean by that is make the best decision for yourself, not your parents, not the coaches, not your brothers, sisters. It should be you, not your girlfriends. It should be all about your career, and make your decision accordingly. And then two, understand that when you get there, you're going to have to perform at a very high level, and sometimes even a greater level than you were already performing, because you have to earn respect on your new team and show them that you're the leader that everyone has talked about as you were coming in as the transfer. And it's the same process with high school kids, where you hear coaches say you have to de-recruit a kid, or bring them down and make them realize that, like, yes, we were plug in, but now you're a player, and now we're going to have to be hard on you to get you developed. It's even harder to do that for transfers, and it sounds like Charlie Brewer had some different expectations for how his time at Utah was going to go.
Should there be a limit, Zach, on how many times you can use the transfer portal?
Yes and no. So yes, in a sense that there should be some like extenuating circumstances, like if something crazy happens so I think the exceptions would be if your head coach leaves like multiple times.
Right, but I'm talking right.
Yeah, but like just on a whim, yes. I think it should be twice. One, because I think some kids, let's be honest, man. I mean, I'm young. I'm a little bit younger than you and everything, so I can kind of speak from, personal experience. I know you can too. Looking back at 18, man, if I was making some of the decisions like these kids were making at 18, I absolutely would have messed the decision up. Especially now with NIL, with coaching, and man, Frank, let's look back at 18. If you were being told by every coach in the country how great you were and how perfect you were, and we'll promise you this and they'll promise you that, don't you think you could potentially make the wrong decision down the line and need kind of like a mulligan? And then I think a second one should come, because nothing stays the same 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, because those promises might not be lived up to. The coach might get fired, this and that. So I think 2 times maximum with no penalty is probably where I would lean toward. Anything more than that gets outrageous. You look at like Tate Martell, I'm pretty sure he's on like his 6th transfer now to UNLV. That's a bit excessive. So for me, I think it should stay at 2.
Yeah, and I'm definitely in agreement with you on at least definitely can't be more than 2. Going off that subject, before we get into the games, obviously the top 25 came out real quickly, folks, especially for those of you that are listening on our radio network, Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Top 25 real quick, 1 through 5, Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Iowa. 6 through 10, Penn State, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Clemson, Ohio State. 11 through 15, Florida, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Iowa, BYU. 16 through 20, Arkansas, Coastal Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Michigan State. And then 21 through 25, North Carolina, Fresno State, who had the big upset over UCLA, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Your Auburn boys at number 23, UCLA, and then Kansas State. For those of you that are listening on our live stream, you will see those rankings at the bottom of our screen. I look through the top 25. Anything, that catches your eyes or surprises you in that top 25?
I don't know about like surprises. So in my top 10 that I released for our channel, I dropped Oklahoma to 5. I think Iowa currently is a better team or has shown that they're a better team than Oklahoma right now. And I guess the other thing is, for me, man, are we 100% sure that Clemson and Ohio State are top 10 teams right now based on the first 3 weeks of the season?
No, I agree with you on that. And some of those questions are going to be answered in the next couple of weeks. And let's go right into it, my friend, because we got a full slate tonight. Let me go ahead and get that off. But, one of the games I started out and nothing, not necessarily in any order of importance, but the big game this weekend had to be Alabama and Florida. And what started out as a game that looked like, they could put you to sleep and run away with this, ended up being one heck of a game as Florida found a way to rush back into this game. And if you look at this game, as I look at my notes here, this game really came down to a mixed extra point by Florida. When we look at this game, you look at the kickers almost cost their teams the game. But I looked at this game and, once again, the Florida rushing game was just tremendous. I thought Emory Jones, even though we've been talking about Anderson playing a lot, I thought he held his own pretty good. He rushed for a lot. He did a pretty good job, threw a touchdown pass. But, I still say this, and I'm listening this week to different things, and some people are talking about the Morrow kid from, Ole Miss or Miss State, about how great he's doing, throwing for all these yards. But I still think Bryce Young is a top quarterback, and it sounds like people are downgrading him because he only beats Florida by 1. I mean, he threw for 233 yards. What did he throw? 3 touchdown passes. John Mechie, like you talked about, last week, came out to play, had 6 receptions. This wasn't a case of Alabama not necessarily playing bad. It was really in the second half. Great job by Dan Mullen making the necessary adjustments at halftime and keeping this team in the game and allowing them the chance to actually win it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the second half, man, Florida was running the ball at an elite level. I mean, I believe their top 2 running backs were averaging like 7-8 yards per carry this past weekend. And that was really the difference in the first half to the second half, is that Florida found a way to run the ball. And then on the flip side, this is the first time I think I could say this, Alabama got beat in the second half, in my opinion. Brian Robinson and McClellan could not move the ball. Bama had under 100 rushing yards for the game, while Florida rushed for 245 yards on the ground. That was the whole story of the second half, is that Florida was able to control the pace of the game, control the clock, and kind of wear down that Alabama defense. It's going to be interesting to see how it looks later in the season, but I can make an argument if they had a kicker and a quarterback that could throw the ball past 10 yards down the field, Florida easily could have won this game. And so for Alabama, they got the pass rushers, their secondary is elite. But what is that front 7 on both sides of the ball going to look like? Their offensive line in the second half got abused, and their defensive line lost the line of scrimmage battle in the second half as well. So Alabama came out of this week, man, with a lot of questions, but I want to put it in perspective for people because this was the first road game for them in one of the most intimidating environments in the country. That crowd was fired up. That team was fired up. Bryce Young, no turnovers again, 3 touchdowns. They found a way to win. And in my opinion, Alabama is still the best team in the country, but they did finally show some kinks in the armor that I didn't think many people thought they had going into this game.
Yeah, and I honestly think, and I have nothing but the greatest amount of respect for Nick Saban, but I think he was outcoached in the second half. I thought Mullen did an incredible job changing, and I mentioned that adjustments, but incredible job. And, you talk about an environment that's tough to play in. Nobody knows better than the next game when it was Penn State and Auburn. And what a whiteout crowd this was. And I'm going to tell you what. First of all, sign me up. Tank Bigsby is awesome, dude. 2 touchdowns, 102 yards, his third straight game, over 100 yards. But, 2 things I noticed in this game, and you're an Auburn fan, so you tell me. I thought Bo Nix, who doesn't usually play well on the road, did a good enough job to help his team win during that game. Auburn, we know, ran well. But the one thing they did is they kept Penn State one-dimensional. They really did. There was really no major Russian attack. I think the difference in this game, when you look at Penn State and you look at Sean Clifford, the thing he did that really helped him out a lot is he got his tight ends involved. A touchdown pass to each of them. And this game easily could have been won by Auburn in Penn State.
Yeah, and I'm not letting Nix off the hook. He played better than he usually has, but the bar wasn't very high. He only averaged 5 yards per attempt. You got to push the ball downfield if you're going to beat the number 10 ranked team on the road, and he failed to deliver on any deep passes. The wide receivers didn't help him out at all. Auburn's wide receivers were probably the second worst group on the field, right behind the Auburn secondary. Auburn's secondary has major issues coming out of this game. I know it was a close game, and I'm an Auburn fan, but I came out very worried about, 1, our secondary, and 2, our pass rush. I don't think they got a single hurry on Sean Clifford this weekend. I mean, Sean Clifford could have set up like a lazy boy in the pocket and watched the episode of whatever Netflix show he was watching, and then he could just dump it down to Jahan Dotson, who had 10 catches this game. What Penn State did so well is they put Auburn's safeties and linebackers in one-on-one matchups against way better players. The tight ends abused the linebackers with their size. Jahan Dotson, those wide receivers, beat the safeties over the top. And Auburn's safeties got caught flat-footed way too much. And what happened was they couldn't get pressure, so even when the corners were covering well, by the time it got to that 4th, 5th, 6th second in the pocket, a wide receiver would break open and Sean Clifford was able to hit him over the middle. And I told y'all last week, the key was Auburn has not been able to stop intermediate passes. That was the key to Penn State winning, and they abused Auburn with intermediate passes all game. Sean Clifford went 28 for 32. That shows you how efficient he was. They didn't even need the run game. It didn't matter if Noah Cain got a single carry. Auburn wasn't going to be able to stop the pass game. And the one call that I still, to this day, it will probably haunt me, a 4th and goal call from the 2-yard line to tie the game. You have the best running back in college football in Tank Bigsby. You have Jarquez Hunter, who's the backup, who was averaging like 7 yards a carry on that drive. And you throw it to the short side of the field on a fade route to your number 3 wide receiver with Bo Nix, who's not accurate at all. He completed under 60% of his passes, and you throw a fade route to the short side of the field in double coverage. I don't know. Mike Bobo should have had to walk home to Auburn on that one. He could not have gotten on the plane after that play call.
And like you said, you talk about the big play, the big defensive holdup, and you may talk about that individual play. But remember here that Auburn had a 1st and goal at the 10-yard line. They kept them out of the end zone. I think it was just over maybe 3 minutes, maybe a little over 3 minutes north of that, where they stopped them. And then once they were able to stop, them on 1st and goal, obviously, you know where the momentum goes. And, Penn State pulled it out. But I still want to say that I was impressed enough. I understand you're right. Anytime a quarterback can go 28 of 32 for you, only miss 4 passes, it's one of 2 things that are happening. Either that quarterback is so damn accurate or that defense is not playing tight enough on those receivers. And I think the latter one was probably more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I came out with a positive impression overall. To only lose to the number 10 team in the country on the road by 8 points with the first-year head coach, I'll take it. It's just Auburn had all the opportunity in the world to win that game. The wide receiver reverse pass screen that they tried to run out of halftime, where the wide receiver fumbled it without being touched and set Penn State up to go up 21-10, was another costly play. Auburn shot themselves in the foot all night. The targeting call at the 2-yard line was a tough one to swallow too, which set Penn State to eventually get the game-winning touchdown. So Auburn had opportunities, but man, Penn State, for me, made a huge, huge impression this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And then a game that you truly picked, Michigan State all over Miami. And I'm going to tell you something. I got to watch this game, Zach, and this Kenneth Walker III is just unbelievable. He rushed for 172 yards and a touchdown. And I'll tell you what, also Peyton Thorne, 4 touchdown passes. This Michigan State Spartan team looked real good. And when you look at it, and I'm going to tell you something about Miami, and you know I'm not a huge D'Eriq King fan. It's no, we've talked about this. But from a statistical standpoint, when you look at him, 38 of 59, which that 59 is a problem to begin with. Why you're throwing the ball so much, obviously we know why. 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. But if you watch this game and you watch D'Eriq King, he was pressured all day long. He was running for his life. He had 2 interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. And the running game, I think Miami had a total of 50 yards or 52 yards rushing the entire game. And you talk about a one-dimensional team. That's what it was on Saturday for Miami. And Michigan State was just too good to overcome.
Yeah, Walker, impressive. Peyton Thorne, impressive. The whole Michigan State team was impressive. They forced D'Eriq King into 2 picks. Miami has an identity issue. They have 0 offensive line. The running backs can't run the ball a lick. I believe Cameron Harris had 44 yards rushing, and then they didn't have a single other running back touch the ball. And I don't understand why. You had to throw it almost 60 times, and it's just – Miami was all out of whack this game when the other team's controlling the clock by running for what? They ran for almost 200 yards with just Walker itself. And then Peyton Thorne throws 4 touchdowns on you when he coming into the season didn't even win the starting job barely. And they put it on you like this.
Zach, and it doesn't help, Zach, that Miami had 4 turnovers as well.
Exactly. I mean, they look atrocious on both sides of the ball. Miami has real issues. And, man, really and truly, I can't imagine how hot that seat is for Manny Diaz right now as the Canes head coach. I mean, it's been year after year saying, we returned this player. We solved our quarterback issue. This position's fixed. We returned 21 starters this year, and they still can't figure out offensive line, quarterback consistency, running the ball. The secondary is still atrocious. I mean, outside of the D-line, I can't think of one unit for Miami that's been solid these past 4 years consistently. And, they didn't have any wide receivers step up. Outside of Brevin Jordan at tight end, they haven't had a tight end that's been very good under Diaz. Yeah, I think for me, this game, Miami versus Florida State this year is going to be so interesting because whoever loses that game out of Norvell and Diaz, they just got to be fired on the field, on the 50-yard line in front of everyone. You just be like, just don't even come to the locker room, man. Do your cars outside. We need to go in a different direction. Both of these programs have been dumpster fires, and Michigan State, man, made a huge statement down in Miami Beach this weekend.
And don't be surprised if both those head coaches are looking for new jobs.
they might fire them together. Even if you win that game, they might say, listen, you can go ahead and go with them.
Yeah. Answer a question for me. Is Clemson that bad, or is Georgia Tech that good?
A little bit of both. I'll put it that way. But I think it's more Clemson, man, has looked atrocious this year. I mentioned it on our show. Clemson has a real issue on the offensive side of the ball. If they didn't have Brent Venables as their D coordinator, Clemson might be 1-2 this year with a loss to Georgia Tech and Georgia. The defense is dragging them to the finish line. I mean, dragging them by like their ears, trying to get them across the finish line. And if they didn't return all those starters, they'd be in trouble. But DJ looks atrocious. He doesn't look comfortable in the pocket. he doesn't look like he understands the offense, but he just looks like he's nervous and he's sailing balls. He's not being efficient. He's escaping from the pocket too soon. And the number one thing is this offensive line has lost the line of scrimmage battle to Georgia, which is understandable because I think now we can say Georgia might have the best front seven in the country right now. But right. You lost it to Georgia Tech, who hasn't, they ran the triple option not too long ago. So they're still trying to figure out how to get offensive linemen in that program. And you lose the line of scrimmage battle at the Ville. How is that even possible if you're Clemson? You got 5 stars at every single position. You get the number one running back in the country, and he only offers you 88 yards on over 20 carries. And then Lynn J. Dixon and I believe it was Kobe Pace were the backup running backs. They're supposed to be the ones to replace Travis Etienne, and they all look atrocious. They can't run the ball, man. They can't pass the ball. Justin Ross looks like the only capable wide receiver in Clemson right now. At this moment, they have NC State up this upcoming week. If they don't take NC State seriously, man, NC State's going to beat them this weekend.
And we'll talk about that.
I wholeheartedly
that a little bit later.
And you have to look too. What is going on with the ACC? I mean, right now, UNC looked atrocious against Virginia Tech, who just got beat by West Virginia. Who Miami looks atrocious. Florida State looks atrocious. NC State just got beat by the worst team in the SEC in Mississippi State. Pitt got beat by Western Michigan this weekend. Who's winning the ACC this year? Everyone's atrocious, and then UNC blows out Virginia this weekend. They're all just beating up on each other, and you're sitting there like, oh, man, Boston College might be the only team that hasn't got embarrassed this year, and they might get embarrassed by Missouri this weekend.
And those are some games we are definitely going to talk about. I put the West Virginia up there, but I want to ask you about another game. You mentioned how West Virginia beat Virginia Tech. Another game that was a huge win, I thought, was North Carolina Tar Heels. Not only did they beat Virginia, they beat Virginia by 20 points, 59-39. But when you look, their offense came together in this game. Sam Howell, 370 yards, 5 touchdown passes. How about Ty Chandler? 20 rushes, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns. But I have to also, give credit to Virginia Tech quarterback Brennan Armstrong, who looked tremendous against that. I don't know if I want to call it weak Tar Heel defense. Got 39 points, 554 yards, and 4 touchdowns. How big of a win was this for North Carolina?
Listen, this is what North Carolina was supposed to look like against Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Right.
This is the team that we all expected to see, and their secondary's got to play better. I mean, 554 yards to Brennan Armstrong. Man, that is a problem. That is a problem for North Carolina. They did great in terms of run defense, which was shocking because really and truly their linebackers are the weak part of their team, and the linebackers had an outstanding game. But Sam Howell, man, I was having a conversation with some guys from our podcast network, and everyone's hating on Sam Howell, saying he's not this, he's not that. This is why I think this game right here is why I think Sam Howell is the best quarterback in the country for next year's NFL draft. 300 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and we saw he can move too. He ran for over 100 yards this weekend on the ground. He can get after it, and the number one thing I think separates him from a Rattler or a Corral is he's just a gamer, man. He's going to go out there and just make plays left and right, and right now he's doing it with one of the worst offensive lines in the country. His offensive line can't block a single soul half the time coming off the edge. So the fact he's still doing this is amazing. And the one thing about Sam Howell which is what Spencer Rattler usually doesn't have to worry about, Corral at times now this year doesn't have to worry about, he used to, is he can't have a bad game. If he has a bad game, that defense ain't stopping anybody right now. And so if he has a bad game, UNC is going to lose. So all the pressure's on him. I thought UNC played an outstanding game. Todd Chandler looked great. The defense was great in the front seven. But for me, if UNC wants to win the ACC, which it's wide open this year, If UNC goes out there and plays like this against Clemson, they'll beat Clemson right now. So they have to figure it out. But it's, for me, how are they going to play against a team with a good D-line? Because Virginia Tech's D-line was ravaged by transfers. They lost their best player, Javon Briggs, to Cincinnati. So for me, UNC, this was a great step forward, but I need them to be more consistent this year.
Now, a few minutes away from having Skip Hall, former Boise State head coach. Before we get him on, and hopefully he'll be on shortly, the next game, I just put up Fresno versus UCLA. There was one person that I know that I spoke to last week that wasn't acting very surprised if Fresno State would win this game. And that was you. You were talking about it that you didn't say they would win, but you said you wouldn't be surprised. Why was that? And why did besides no running game for UCLA at all, the two big boys, Brown and Charbonneau, had nothing. What was it that prevailed besides that for Fresno?
Yeah, one, I was skeptical about UCLA. Hawaii has looked terrible the past few weeks, and LSU has not impressed me either. So I was wondering how quality of wins those actually were. And Fresno State, they've been cruising through these games and giving everyone problems. And the number one thing that was going to hurt UCLA is they're not a high-scoring team. They don't have an explosive offense. They have a consistent offense. And what Fresno State was able to do is put pressure on them because their offense can go out there and score 45 points a game without even blinking. Haener, for the quarterback for Fresno State, I think he's in the Heisman contention. That kid has been doing nothing but ball out week in and week out. 455 yards, 2 touchdowns this week. They could run the ball well. And then you mentioned it. Charbonnet and Brown got stuffed this weekend. I believe they had a combined like 30 or 40 yards rushing, and Charbonnet had 2 red zone touchdowns. They shut that running game down, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is not good enough to go win a game on his arm. And when you compare him to the most efficient offense in the country 2 years ago in this Fresno State team, they stood no chance. And I am so impressed with Fresno State. And personally, I think right now, even looking at Boise State, looking at San Jose State, they should be the favorites in the Mountain West this year.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. One thing for Fresno State to upset UCLA, another thing to stop that powerful running game just amazed me. But, it goes to prove what we talk about every week on this show, that on any other given day, these are college football players. Execution is the key to success, and just shows you when they come out and they execute and get a team that might not be on that day, that on any day, any team can prevail.
Absolutely. And listen, Fresno State is going to be a problem moving forward. And a lot of these guys, I think, are going to wind up on NFL rosters. I think you're going to see Fresno State a lot more this year. Looking at their schedule, it's all it's all conference play after this. But Boise State and San Jose State are 2 of their last 3 games. And personally, I could not be more excited to see them go up against that Mountain West talent like that.
Yeah, and I think another great guy, Super Bowl quarterback, played at Fresno State. Do you know who that was?
I probably should, but I'm probably blanking. I'm not a huge NFL guy.
Trent Dilfer.
Nope, yep.
I played
I was trying to think.
That was the second college. I had to throw that out there. I just contacted. That's what I was doing. Looking down to Coach Howell to let him know we are ready. He got the message, so hopefully he should be coming on. Let me just ask him, are you? So hopefully we'll give it a couple seconds. That way we don't get into something and then have to start over again. But after the interview with Coach Howell, we're going to go ahead and break down some unbelievable matchups that are going to be happening this week. Zach mentioned a couple of them, but let's go ahead. While we got a quick moment, let's take a quick 15-second station break to allow our stations to identify themselves. You are listening to Frankly Speaking Panthers on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Oh, what a great mood it is. College football season. We love it. We are about a minute away from having Coach Howell on with us. I just found out he's on his way now, coming on. But, we are going to talk about a lot with Coach Howell. Coach Howell was the coach, let me get my notes here, from 1987 to 1992 at Boise State University. And, you're going to find out some amazing facts. A lot of people don't know this about Coach Howell, but Jim Zorn was a quarterback coach for him who played in the NFL. And two great coaches were actually players for Coach Howell. Jim Mora played for him. You'll be amazed, unless you did your homework, on who the second player that played for him was. Do you know who that was?
I do not.
Alabama head coach Nick Saban.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, doesn't that? I know, I was surprised. I did not know that either. But Nick Saban, they're both former players. So, got some questions we definitely can ask him surrounding that as he tries to get on right now. I'm going to look at my phone a minute, Zach, and make sure he doesn't says, are you on your way? Yes. Okay. Yes means yes. No means no. But, Zach, while we're waiting for him, we mentioned a lot of the games. Any other game real quickly from last week that stuck out, that surprised you?
Outside of this, I think the Ohio State struggle was one that really caught my eye. The fact that they, were really they've struggled a lot with Tulsa. Tulsa won the line of scrimmage all night on the defense side of the ball. That defensive front has so many problems for Ohio State. And the other game was, I was so impressed with Cincinnati's win over Indiana as well.
Yes.
A lot of people didn't talk about that, but to go on the road for your first Power 5 road game, be down 14-0 in the first quarter and come back to win by 14 was outstanding. And for me, we got to start putting some respect on Desmond Ritter's name in the Heisman race. That kid is balling out there at Cincinnati. And for me, a lot of people love Derek Stingley, man. Let's just be honest. Everyone thinks he's the next great corner. I think Ahmad Gardner at Cincinnati is the best corner prospect that we've had in 2-3 years. I think he's better than J.C. Horn. I think he's better than Patrick Surtain. I think Ahmad Gardner has that type of potential in the NFL. He held Ty Freifogel, who was one of the leading receivers in the Big Ten last year, to no catches against him in one-on-one coverage. He was all over the field. He still hasn't allowed a touchdown catch. He is one of the best statistical corners. He's long at 6'2", 180. And for me, he proved this weekend his worth. And if he can do it in 2 weeks against Notre Dame, for me, it just solidifies him as the best corner in the country.
And Zach, we're going to talk later about the upcoming game with Boston College and Missouri this week. But are you surprised in that ACC that Boston College is 3-0?
No, the Boston College was actually my sleeper pick in the ACC in the preseason. They returned so much talent. Jeff Hafley, the head coach, is one of the most underrated head coaches in the country. That team's legit. When you look at last year, they were one score away from beating Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Clemson. If one or two plays go opposite last year, Boston College potentially could have won the ACC. That's how close they were. And teams who usually lose close games the year before come back and win them this year. I would not be surprised if Boston College is the second or third finishing team in the ACC this year.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the big game versus Missouri coming up. We're just, for those folks tuning in, we are minutes away. We're trying to get Coach Skip on with us right now. So he says he is on his way. Let me just let him know I don't want to bug him. So I'm not sure if he's having difficulty with the computer, but we will find out. If not, we will go into, we'll just start with the next segment of our show, and then guess we'll have to be interrupted if, which is fine. That's what we do here when we're doing shows like this. We always go. But you know what? While we're on that subject, I got 4 questions. I call it question time. I usually wanted to do this after we go over the games, but let's do it now while we're waiting for Coach to come on. I got 4 questions for you, Zach, and I'm going to post them, and I'll read them to you. The first question for next week: can UCLA rebound versus Stanford?
Yeah, I think they can. I personally think they're going to beat Stanford by a pretty significant margin. When you look at Stanford, it's a team that their weakness is the run defense. And if the one thing you can't have against UCLA is you have to be able to defend the run, they do not do that well at all. So for me, UCLA is going to have an easy time moving the ball on the ground. I think Charbonnet has an explosive game. And a lot of people like Stanford due to their win over USC. That win is looking worse and worse as the weeks go by, especially after Clay Helton's fired. That team's in turmoil. I think UCLA rebounds in a big way against Stanford this weekend.
All right. Question number 2. Can Wake Forest move to 4-0 versus Virginia?
Man, this game is going to be so hard to predict because I really don't have answers for either team. I mean, really and truly, let's be honest, who has Wake Forest impressed you beating? Because the Florida State win was a big win, but at the same time, Florida State's been atrocious all year. And Virginia, their loss was to a very good UNC team. I think these teams are more evenly matched than you would think. And for me, I personally think that Virginia is a better overall team than Wake Forest. So I actually think Virginia probably could upset the Demon Deacons this weekend.
All right. You were talking about this earlier. You must have read my mind. Can Boston College move to 4-0 versus Missouri?
That offense has to come to play. Missouri is going to put points on the board. They have an explosive offense with Connor Blazelick. If Boston College can score, they're going to have to probably score at least 28, 30 points or more. But for me, the game being in Boston's huge. Missouri's coming off a crusher that they lost to Kentucky. And so for me, I actually do think Boston College wins this game against Missouri this weekend and moves to 4-0. Like I said, I got so much confidence in Hafley and that offense with Phil Dracovic at quarterback. And for me, Zay Flowers at wide receiver is going to be a huge X factor. But I absolutely think Boston College pulls this one out.
Wow. And wouldn't that be amazing? 4-0 Boston College. It just amazes me how far they have come. All right, guys. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our next segment. And then when Coach comes on, I just messaged him that we are waiting for him. So he should text me back in a moment. Like I said, sometimes these things happen when you're doing live shows, and we'll see if he can get on here. But let's start with our first game, and once again, team that did not look very good. Last week is Clemson. We talked about Clemson. They play North Carolina State. Not that Leary looks any better, but he looks better than DJ at least. But
I think he looks much better than DJ. I don't even think you have to put a qualifier. He's thrown for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, and DJ has thrown more interceptions than touchdowns this year. So you don't even have to put a qualifier before that one.
All right, beautiful. Now I say in order for Clemson to win this game, they're gonna have to stop Shipley, and they're gonna have to force. North Carolina State is going to have to stop DJ and force him to continue to make mistakes like he's been making these first few games. But the other side of the ball, NC State has to protect Leary. I'm not sold on that offensive line at NC State. I really not. He's been sacked 5 times this year, forced into 2 interceptions. But let me see. Something I wrote here. I can't read my handwriting, but and then NC State has a good running back in Knight who has 2 games over 100 yards. How do you see that game playing out?
I think this game is very close. I just something inside of me just tells me it's too good to be true to pick NC State for the upset. I think Leary's great, but like you said, the one thing you can't have against Clemson is a poor offensive line, and that's going to be a problem. Can Leary find enough time to be comfortable in the pocket and make the plays down the field that he needs to? And can Zonovan Knight find some room running? The one thing NC State has going for them is they have one of the best run defenses in the country. That front 7 for NC State is stout. So I think they'll be able to slow down Shipley in that rushing attack. But the question comes in the back end of the defense for NC State and whether they can force DJ into mistakes. I don't know if that's the case. They are going to have home field advantage. It's just right now I'm having a tough time to think that NC State has enough in the tank to completely upset Clemson, but I don't think that. I believe the spread I'm looking here is 10 points. I do not see Clemson covering that. I think this is a 1-score game this weekend in Carter Finley Stadium.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Next game we're gonna go to, and excuse me for that, is it ain't one of the better games. Well, I'm sorry. It's one of the better games. It's not necessarily the best game, and that's Notre Dame goes down this weekend. Wisconsin, number 18, is playing home versus Notre Dame. I'm not sold on Notre Dame. I mean, I love Jack Cohn. I love what he's done. But Wisconsin has one of the top 50 defenses in the entire nation, and I think this is the game that Notre Dame finally loses.
Yeah, it's the Jack Cohen revenge game, man. He transferred from Wisconsin this offseason, played against his own team, and it's also going to be interesting to see how the fan turnout is. This game's in Soldier Field in Chicago, and so a big neutral site game. I want to see, how many fans travel to that game and, show out for each team. But I think the clear advantage in the passing game is for Notre Dame. They have, in my opinion, Mayer at tight end's a problem. Jack Cohen has performed better through the air than Graham Mertz has. But when you look at what Wisconsin does well, it's run the ball. And what Florida State exposed against Notre Dame is that you can run up the middle on them. You can find space inside. I believe it was Jashawn Corbett, for Florida State, found a lot of room inside to run. So I think Wisconsin is going to have a heavy dose of Ches Malushi on the inside. They're going to run the ball and control it. The number one thing, though, is this Notre Dame offensive line has to stop the front 7 of Wisconsin. They get their All-American linebacker back from COVID protocol. That front 7 for Wisconsin is going to be stout. If they can stop Kyron Williams and force Jack Cohen to put this game on his back, it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to lose. Personally, I agree with you. I think Wisconsin pulls out a close one. Don't know if they cover the spread or not, but I would say Wisconsin has a solid chance to win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this game, like you said, it's going to be won because of their defense. If their defense has to deliver what they've been doing all year long, and, I think the key is going to be Mertz, no mistakes. You got to play mistake-free football. You can't allow a team like Notre Dame with those weapons of Mike Meyer and, Jack Cohn, who we both have been agreeing has been playing well. You can't give them points. And I think Wisconsin. But the game of the week, I'm representing. I lived there for 6 months. And I think, and tell me if you agree with me, a win here by Arkansas over Texas A&M moves them number 10 or better.
Oh yeah, this win, it probably put in my top 8. personally. I mean, this would be a huge win for me, and especially. But the one thing I will report is what I've been reading going into this weekend is that Arkansas could be missing 2 starting offensive linemen this weekend, which is going to be a huge loss against this very, very talented defensive front for the Aggies. So that is something to look for ahead of time. But the number one thing that's interesting is Texas A&M has only allowed 77 passing yards per game this year. That's a ridiculous stat line to allow under 100 yards a game through the air. So passing, they're doing that. Jalen Jones, Leon O'Neal, and them boys, and Damani Overshone. Not Damani Overshone. I'm blanking on his name now. Damani Richardson in the back end of that defense has been playing out of their mind. The spread's 5.5, man. What's gonna come down to is can KJ Jefferson not turn the ball over? That's the number one thing. Run the football. Take that game plan you did from Texas and run it down Texas A&M's throat. That's been their weakness. They're allowing over 160 yards per game on the ground. They have to run the ball, and that front seven for Arkansas has to get after Zach Calzada, the backup quarterback. As we all know, Haynes King is out for the Aggies for an extended amount of time. Yeah. Right now, I haven't done my preview, but right now I'm leaning toward picking Arkansas for the upset, depending on like the injury status of those 2 O-linemen. I've been hanging on to record my preview until I hear more about that. But right now, I really do think Arkansas has a great chance to pull off the upset this weekend.
Yeah, and when you look at some of this, and you know, Arkansas is averaging 41 points a game. The problem is they're giving up 48 points a game. So this is a game that really could be won. Even though Arkansas has a nice defense here at times, they do give up some points. But I think they're going to have to rely A&M if they're to win on the running game with Isaiah Spiller.
Yeah, Spiller's huge. Arkansas's defense is solid, man. We talked about it last week. Jalen Catalon in the back end, Bumper Pool at linebacker. They got talent all over that field. I think Arkansas's defense, though, can make enough stops. When you look at Texas A&M stats, they're a bit inflated. Colorado, their offense is not very good. They got shut out by Minnesota, and then they played New Mexico and Kent State. So it's not like they've been playing world beaters, while on the other hand, Arkansas had that tough game against Texas coming in, and they performed so well in that one, and they found a way to stop Bijan Robinson. So I feel like they're going to have enough to stop Isaiah Spiller. The question is, can they do it away from home in this neutral site game in Arlington, Texas? That's going to be the question here, but Arkansas is going to be very, very tough to beat this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I mean, gosh almighty, here's a team, when we started the season, they didn't even have ranked. I mean, it just shows you how much the rankings mean or do not mean. But I'll tell you what, when you watch this team week after week after week, they're just very, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I like Arkansas a lot this year, man. Right now, I'd say right this second, they're the second best team in the SEC West. I think they're better than Auburn right now. I definitely think they're better than LSU. And if they can beat A&M, they solidify themselves as at the number 2 spot in the West.
Yeah. I'm trying to find out if Coach Howell's coming on, and he keeps giving me the thumb up, but every time I look, he's not on. So I'm not on now, he said. Or he said on no. So we'll find out in a second if he's coming up or not. Any other game this week that I haven't mentioned, and I'm sure you'll come up with one that seems to stay on your radar?
Okay, so I like Rutgers and Michigan as a game to watch out for. 2:30 on ABC. Michigan's a big favorite, but Rutgers is 3-0, and Rutgers took this Michigan team to 3 overtimes last year. That's going to be a huge game, and if Michigan's overlooking Rutgers, that could be an interesting one. And then I also like Kansas State, Oklahoma State. That's Kansas State squeaked into the top 25 late. They do have a backup quarterback going into this game, but Oklahoma State has a lot of questions surrounding their program. This is really going to be a Big 12 kind of deciding game this week and who's going to be a real contender for the Big 12. And then also, if you're looking for a weekly game to watch, so Thursday night, Alcorn State versus Arkansas Pine Bluff. It's on ESPNU at 6:30. It's an HBCU SWAC game. Alcorn has dominated the SWAC. They've won. They didn't play last year because of COVID, but before that, they won like 4 straight SWAC titles. And UAPB won their division last year in the SWAC due to Alcorn not playing. This is going to be huge for the SWAC West Conference there. And they're 2 very talented HBCU programs. Skylar Perry and Felix Harper are 2 great quarterbacks. So if you're looking for an FCS game to watch on Thursday night, definitely tune into Alcorn, Arkansas Pine Bluff.
And you mentioned, what was it, Jackson State, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Tell me about the job you think Deion Sanders is doing over there.
Yeah, he's doing an outstanding job. He actually had the highest rated FCS recruiting class this past season. His son was a 4-star quarterback who transferred over. He's starting at quarterback right now in Shador. And then outside of Shador, they have a bunch of talented wide receivers. They got a bunch of talented D1 transfers on the D line.
Just follow the link right in, and it should take you right into the studio. Yeah, it should say enter studio now. And yeah, you know the link that I sent you? Yeah, I sent you Messenger. Go to your Messenger. You'll see the link. You see the link and just hit the link and it'll take you right in. Just follow it. All right, I'm just on the air live, so. Yeah, I understand. Zach, if you want to talk about any other game, go ahead while I'm on with Coach.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, and then also, guys, I would say LSU Mississippi State's another interesting game. LSU's only a 2-point favorite. It's going to be an 11 a.m. game. That game's going to be huge in terms of deciding how the SEC West is going to go out, and it's going to be an outstanding game. We're going to see if LSU's problems can be solved against Mississippi State. They got a huge win over NC State, so that's going to be a game to watch as well. And then also, Iowa State Baylor is going to be an interesting game for the Big 12. That's at 2:30 on Fox. Iowa State's 2-1, number 14 ranked, but David Aranda is turning Baylor into something serious this season, and so that will definitely be another game to watch as well. And then also, do not forget about Michigan State, Nebraska this upcoming week. This is Michigan State's first Big Ten test as they've been rolling through the Big Ten in 2021.
On the bottom, does it say enter broadcast? All right, I'm going to send it one more time to you, okay? All right. To your messenger. Do you have another place you want it sent? Okay, I'm doing it right now. Okay. All right, let me do that for Coach. I'm sorry about that, Zach.
Oh, no, you're good.
All right. All right, we went ahead. I sent it twice to him, so hopefully he'll get in. If not, we'll give him about 3-4 minutes there. You talked about the ACC and I don't know if you want to call it the demise of the ACC, but what do you think is the main difference this year and previous years with the ACC, and why are the teams struggling so much in the ACC?
I can't really put my finger on why exactly they're struggling, but it's just been a long line of recruiting failures for the ACC, and also just I feel like their perception is kind of caught up to them to a point. I mean, you look at the ACC, the undefeated teams in the ACC, man, are Wake Forest and Boston College. Well, I don't think anyone would have guessed that at week 3 or going into week 4 that Wake Forest and Boston College would be the undefeated teams in the ACC. You look at the Coastal Division, and it is just chaos. Virginia Tech, UNC are probably the top 2 teams, but Duke right now has a better record than Miami. And Duke was supposed to be absolutely atrocious this year. For me, the ACC's, one, got to step up their recruiting. 2, they're falling into the Pac-12 way of losing all their out-of-conference games. They have to win those. And so for me, there's been a series of bad coaching hires. At Florida State, they hired a bad coach. Miami's coach didn't work out. Louisville hit a rough spot this past year. Syracuse had a lot of coaching issues. So it was just like a series of bad decisions by ADs. But for me, I think it will correct itself as we get into the future, because I don't think Miami and Florida State are going to spend any money, hold back any money to get the right guy in the house in-house for them.
Yeah, and it's definitely surprised by those teams. Wake Forest, obviously, here in North Carolina, and everybody in the Carolina area was looking at North Carolina. Clemson, obviously, a couple of hours away. Maybe NC State, might be a surprise this year. And then you get a team like Wake Forest that, basically is just surprising everything. What is it about Wake Forest? I mean, what is it about what they are doing that are making them perform so well this year?
I think it's really kind of the emergence of Sam Hartman at quarterback. He was on the Netflix reality show QB1 or whatever it was called. He's played outstanding, man. 6 touchdowns, only 1 interception. He's thrown for almost 700 yards. And just that team's been so balanced. Beal Smith and Turner at running back have both been consistent. And that defense has played bend but don't break type play, and they've just been rolling. I mean, Clawson has those guys playing a high level of football. Now, outside of Florida State, they've played Old Dominion and Norfolk State, so not many quality wins right now. But you look at the road trip to Virginia this week. They have UNC, Clemson, NC State, and Boston College are their final 4 games this year. That's where we're going to find out exactly what Wake Forest is. But I would imagine going into like week 10 or 11, I would not be surprised if Wake Forest only had 1 or 2 losses at that point.
Yeah. Giving one last attempt here. We may do this call over the phone. Coach has been trying, I guess, for a while to get on, but having difficulty with his laptop. I just told him we'll go ahead, quickly do it over the phone. We'll do the interview, and then we'll wrap it up here on College Football Tuesday. We'll see if he gives the number. I'll give him a couple minutes here, and then we will go ahead, because the one thing we do here, folks, we promise you an interview we're going to try to deliver for you. There are some certain situations that come up where people have either computer issues. Sometimes they try to use their phone and the phones aren't applicable to StreamYard. That's okay. We get the number right now. We'll go ahead, do this interview, because I'll tell you, folks, this is one interview you definitely want to hear, and I can go ahead and put this right here via telephone. So that should be easy. He's typing me back right now with it, and we'll see if we get it right now from him. So we'll give him 2 seconds. If not, we'll wrap up this show. Thank you all so very much for sticking with us through this. Sometimes, like I said, here we go. He gave us the number. Now I gotta write it down. All right, all right, and we're gonna have the coach on. Well, the only thing is he dialed too many numbers. Oh man, the funny things that happened. 208 871 844. All right, let's try it here. I'm dialing them right now. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to introduce to you on the Frankly Speaking Sports College Football Tuesday Hotline. Let's welcome in former head coach of Boise State, Skip Hall. Skip, how you doing tonight?
Well, I'm so sorry the connection wasn't good, but I'm here now, and it's a pleasure, my pleasure, to be on with you.
And Skip, it's our pleasure to have you, and I completely understand the technology that we use today. Sometimes it's not compatible to certain phones and certain computers, so we completely understand and appreciate you sticking with us and getting on the show.
Well, thanks, Bert. I appreciate it.
Coach, let me ask you this right off the bat. I'm live here with Zach Mckinnell of the Blue Buds, excuse me. Had to skip that words out. My co-host. How tough is it, back in 1987, when you come into a program, and I see some coaches like Sam Pittman, for example, of Arkansas, Dan Mullen of the Gators, who have come over and they pretty quickly have been able to make adjustments and turn programs around pretty quickly. How tough is it for a head coach to take over a new position like you did at Boise State back in 1987 and to implement your program, not just to your players, but also to the boosters and the alumni as well?
Well, it's tough. It's really tough. And even backing up from that, at Kent State, we went in 1971, just after they shot 4 students on campus. And everything was in an uproar. I mean, it was awful. And we had to recruit going into that, which we did, and had a very successful recruiting campaign. But, every step along the way, no matter where you're at or what's going on, you've got to recruit the best available talent that you can find. And that's what we did. And the same thing at Boise State. When I came in, there were 2 major problems. One was academic integrity. The players weren't really keyed in on going to school and doing the things they needed to do. And number 2 was character development. They needed to have some solid citizens. And so that's what we set our sights on from that point on, is character people that had academic integrity on their mind, but were also great football players.
Yeah, now, Coach, when you look for a recruit, back then when you were recruiting, and you go and you meet the person, you have a habit of surrounding yourself or have surrounded yourself with some great, great people. When you were recruiting, even though it was a player, was one of the qualities you looked for in a player, was it their ability to also teach and be a coach?
Well, listen, my whole coaching career, the number one quality I look for in recruiting was character. Character is the key, because without character, you can't go very far. And that was true, and that's why I always wanted to connect with the parents. I wanted to see what kind of a home they came from. And the moms especially were key for me, because it's like me and Woody Hayes. We would snuggle up to the moms, because if we could get close to the moms and believed in what we were doing, that we had a great chance. But yeah, it was about character and developing the kind of people that I know that they wanted them to become, besides great football players. And that was our key.
Now, Coach, I know you gave Jim Zorn his first coaching job at Boise State. Jim Mora and Nick Saban both played for you. I mean, I really am interested, when Nick Saban was a player, did you ever imagine, in the craziest mind that you could have, that Nick would turn out to be one of the best, if not the best, head coaches in college football?
Yeah, well, here's the deal on Nick. I mean, Nick was a player for us when we first went into Kent State, and again, they had just shot and killed 4 students on campus, so it was a tough atmosphere. But Nick was a real leader. I mean, he wasn't real big, he wasn't real fast, but he was a tremendous competitor, and I guess that's the word I would use, along with Jack Lambert. I mean, the people that are great competitors have a great chance to become successful. And Nick was certainly that. And after he got done with his playing career, Coach Don James convinced him that, hey, Nick, your wife still has another year to go in school. So why don't you, hang around with us, become a graduate assistant, let your wife finish school, and you can coach with us for a year. Well, which he did, and then he loved it, absolutely loved it. And that's what turned the tide for Nick. I mean, he could have gone back and gone into the family business and done that, but that's not what really lit him up. So he became a coach, and a very, very great one, as we all know.
Coach, I know you went ahead and coached at different levels, Division I, AA, obviously Boise State Division I. When, besides maybe the talent, what is the major difference between coaching in those different divisions?
Well, there's not a whole lot of difference other than the talent level that you deal with. That's the key. You get so much difference in the 1A level. You get some of the best players in the country. At the 1AA level, you get good players, but they're not quite there yet. And sometimes they become that. They become as good as you want them to be. But the key again is their competitiveness. Being great players that want to succeed. And we were fortunate at Boise State, and you can see it today. I mean, Boise State has grown into a wonderful 1A program, which is what we talked about even back when I was a coach there, is that we wanted to become a 1A program that matched up with some of the best programs in the country. So there you go.
I'm going to let Zach jump in. Zach, I want to make sure you get your questions in.
Yeah, so I know you coached at Boise State while they were still in the Big Sky at the FCS level, but just looking at what Boise State has turned into as a program, look at Chris Peterson, Brian Harsin, and now Andy Avalos. Man, what was it about Boise State that was just like that sleeping giant? And what do you just think? Like, what do you think about how the program has evolved since you were the head coach to now?
Well, even when I was hired back in 1987, the president and the athletic director told me that we want to go for a 1A program. So that was on the table even back then. Even though we didn't have the budget, we didn't have the facilities, but that was the goal. And I think every step of the way now has led us to that. And all the coaches that have gone after me have done a wonderful job of developing this thing. And even Andy Avalos right now, even though we've gotten off to a slow start, but watch out. We're gonna be good. We're gonna be good. It's gonna happen. So it's we're the makeup of this program and the Boise, Idaho community, the fanfare. I mean, they're all for it, and we're gonna be there. We're gonna succeed.
Absolutely. And then you also look at Boise State's been potentially rumored to be in one of the next groups for the Big 12's possible expansion. Would you like to see Boise State move up to the Power Five and eventually challenge for one of those college football playoff spots? And and if that happens, what do you think it could do for not only the school, but the football program in terms of all the extra TV money, recruiting access, and things like that for Boise State?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the right time, things will happen. I think as we keep climbing, keep building, keep growing, the fan base, all that stuff, as it continues to grow, this program is on its way to becoming one of those successful programs, whatever league we're in, Big 12 or whatever. Yeah, we're going to be there, and the Boise fanfare here is such a tremendous group of people. I mean, they love their football, and they're not going to back off. So it'll be exciting to see what happens.
Absolutely. And then like my last question here is, in 1987, 1990s, it wasn't a huge thing, but now with the addition of NIL, the transfer portal, things like that, how do you think it's changed the head coaching job for like a Nick Saban or a Dabo Swinney compared to when you were coaching at Boise State in the late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, some of the things that have happened I don't like. I mean, paying players, individual players, and all that. I'm not for that. I think it hurts our game. College football is supposed to be an amateur sport. That's where we're at, and that's what we should be. And starting to pay players for individual accomplishments and individuals this and that, I don't like it. And I think it hurts. It's a division. It hurts the rest of the team. So hopefully, my suggestion, real quick, is if they're going to want to increase, players to get more out of it, why don't we increase the scholarship limits for all the scholarship players? Why don't we give them more so they can live and do more with what they got? And that would be my solution.
And I mean, kind of building off of that, I don't know if you saw Mike Leach suggested that with NIL, they should put a price tag on a bachelor's degree and then an even steeper one if they stay for all 4 years and like get a master's in something. Is that something that would be a good idea for you?
Yeah, let's reward them for what they're doing, and let's reward all of them, not just one or two people.
Yeah. Coach, I have one last question, and I know I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more on it. The transfer portal. I know I'm not a big fan of it because I think, especially I don't think the coaches that coached when you were coaching would be big fans of it, because I feel for two reasons. Number one, it takes the discipline out of the game, because every time you discipline a player, they're going to go cry and then transfer over to somewhere else until they get their way. And then number two, Zach and I at the beginning of our show, we were talking about Charlie Brewer, who just transferred. He had first transfer from Baylor to Utah. Now, since he's lost the starting job at Utah, he's entering the transfer portal again. I'd love to get your opinion on what you think of the transfer portal before we let you go.
Well, transfer. I mean, where do you stop? I mean, you know where you begin, but where do you stop? And this hurts college football. Again, I go back to college football is an amateur sport. It's supposed to be. And to listen to all this other stuff about paying players and transferring and that to me is not the name of the game. And I would hope that we put our foot down and say, okay, this is what it is. This is where we're at, and we're going to continue to do it. So I've loved being on your show. You've got some great questions. Keep it up, man. I appreciate it.
All right, Coach. Thank you so much, and be safe.
Thank you.
All right, that was Skip Howell, former head coach of Boise State. And one thing there before we wrap up this show, Zach, is it seems like when you and I get a coach or even maybe a player that plays back from that range from like 80s to early 90s, they seem to not so much like necessarily the NIL or the transfer portal. And then as you move on from like 2000 up, it seems like they're for it. I guess that's just a change of the times, the people that are adapting, or what do you think the main reason is?
Yeah, it's like adaptation, and like also you're coming at it from coaches who haven't had to deal with it in their job. So it's just like asking a tenured employee at a company how he likes the new protocols, safety protocols in place. So he's not going to like it because he got used to doing it a different way, while the newer employees don't care and they like it because they never knew the old way. So like that's what makes Nick Saban and those type of coaches even more impressive than they already are. The Mac Browns, where they've had this longevity and been able to adapt to all this. And so for me, and also coaches nowadays have a different relationship with their players than I think they did back in the late 80s, early 90s, things like that. So I just think it's college football evolving. And so it's the same with, you could talk politics, you could talk sports, you could talk whatever you want. Things evolve over time and different generations have different opinions. I think that's kind of what you're seeing right now.
All right, my friend, before we let you go, let them know, everyone, when is the Blue Bloods doing their weekly show, how they can catch you, and make sure they get all the updated college news.
Yeah, you guys can go to youtube.com /backscore the Blue Bloods, or just look up the Blue Bloods on YouTube, or the first result that popped up. We actually dropped our first two previews today. We previewed Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Notre Dame, Wisconsin. We have 3 previews dropping tomorrow of 3 games I believe we talked about today. We have we have Alcorn State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, that FCS matchup that I told you guys about. We also have UCLA, Stanford, and also Texas A&M, Arkansas dropping tomorrow. So all 3 will be dropping on our YouTube channel. So go subscribe to us there, turn on your post notifications, and we're like one of the only channels on YouTube, man, that has daily college football content.
All right, and then as far as Frankly Speaking Panthers tomorrow night, you can catch us tomorrow. We are going to have, everybody here in the Carolina areas talking about the emergence of the Panthers. What great defense. But another story here has been the play of quarterback Sam Darnold and what he's done since he's left the New York Jets. Well, we couldn't have a better guest than tomorrow night than the great Mike Mckinnell. And if you're not sure who Mike Mckinnell is, he's been the lead sports columnist for the New York Post since 2002. So he'll be joining us, telling us some stories about Sam when he was in New York and how surprised he is with the emergence of Sam here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself, Zach Mckinnell, we want to thank you once again for being patient with us while our special guest was trying to get on. But like I said, we're persistent. We'll find a way, if he can't get on, to get them on, and we did it via telephone. Hopefully you enjoyed that 15 minutes. Some tremendous stuff from a great, great man and a great, great coach. And both myself and Zach will be back next Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the same channels. Good night.